Sounds like I shouldn't be admin of my own course then.
If you don't trust yourself yet. That option also is good if you are co-teaching a course with a colleague. You can add them to that. You can also add a grad student who is working with you on the course. Maybe they are helping you, do things here and there. So you can add them. So that option is also for these cases.
All right, so thumbs up if you're following along. You've got your team member added and your 2 content guides. Okay. So does anyone have any questions about team members before I move forward?
Sorry, I'm having trouble for some reason adding Doug and Elon. I don't know why. Maybe I'm not using the right email.
Okay, yeah, so I pulled the emails back up on my screen. Is it working, Aileen?
Yes, I had the wrong emails. I was looking at a different. If I could spell Louisiana, that would help. Okay, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. So next, I propose that we change the display name. So when you imported the module template, it overwrote what was already there, which happens, but we can fix that. So again, we're going to go to settings and then go down to advanced settings. All right, so from this advanced settings, we're going to change the display name. Here we go. So scroll down to course display name, and then you can change the name in between the quotation marks to be the title of your module. And then of course, once you change something, always remember to save. So you should have a little pop-up on the bottom of your screen that says you've made some changes. Always hit that Save Changes button.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that it has to be like within quotes, like the name. Yeah, otherwise there will be an error. So.
Thanks for pointing that out.
There was a question, when we add a user, do they get some kind of notification that they've been added, or do they just look and see that the course is there?
Jenny, I might help you here. I think you get a notification. I think you get a notification.
I think you do not.
Okay.
Because people have just been adding a bunch of us, and I haven't got any emails.
Okay. I can never disagree with David.
Well, maybe the email's going to spam. I don't.
No, it's probably true. I get notifications. I think now I might take that back when people create accounts and ask for instructors and so forth. So
Yeah, I think that's what you're thinking about. But the person that you add, once they log into their studio, they should see your module listed. Okay. All right, so we've exported, we've imported, we've hidden, we've added team members, we've added content and education guides. The next step is to begin building out your module. And so the next two things that we're going to work on is creating your module outline and populating your overall learning objectives table. So obviously this process is going to be unique to each of you. Everyone's module is different. So I'm just going to tell you what to do and let you run with it. So what's handy about this template is that it has all of the steps you need. It also tells you how this module was designed to be used by you. So once you have finished adding your team members, you can start changing and rearranging and adding and subtracting things and really making this your own. So this section here that just says section title, this whole block here is meant to be duplicated, copied as often as you need to make every section that you will need for your module. So this is just an example of what one section can have in it. So obviously we've got the introduction, the summary and the overall learning objectives that we've talked about. One subsection is in here, you can copy and make more. But each subsection should have, the background information or the problem statement, a check your understanding, and a learning activity of some sort. These are both the same things, just two different versions of making a learning activity. So in order to duplicate a section, you can hit this little symbol here that looks like two pieces of paper with the edges folded. You can duplicate and it just drops it down to the bottom or right below. That's new. And then here you can rename it and do whatever you want to do. The same thing for subsections. You can just duplicate it and it adds it into this section where you duplicated it from. So you may be wondering, why is this orange? What does that mean? All it means is that your changes are not published yet. Because your modules are hidden, this makes zero impact for you. But after your modules are live and you publish something, it becomes a little more important, but we'll worry about that later. So if you want to publish anything, you can just hit the publish button, which looks like a bar with an arrow on top. And then it lets you know that you have published your changes. So that's how you would create your module outline. Just duplicating and rearranging is necessary. So for the overall learning objectives table, here we are, which is in your introduction section. We have the table already made for you and you just fill it out as you need to. So when you come to this component, which is a text component, just go ahead and click edit. And then in here, you can add the learning objectives that are tied to each section, and then the learning objectives that are in the subsections. You can add subsection titles of your learning activity, etc., etc. It's pretty straightforward. If you need to add, like if you have more than 3 sections and you need to add a row, you would just use these little icons up here. Insert row above, below, delete, select. It's pretty much just like Excel. You can even merge, tells you the directions that you can merge, and you can also split cells. Okay, so that completes my little demo / tutorial. I believe at this point, I pass the mic off back to Dan. But before I do, does anyone have questions for me?
Can we work parallelly with our partner at the same time? Would it affect things that we save or not save?
Maybe we can pay you a grant to do that feature in Hydrolert. I'm actually not sure how to do it, if it works or not, and if it causes issues. So I would try it from the very first time, and if things break down, then it doesn't work. I don't think we ever tried it, Jenny, have we?
Well, Melissa wants to say something.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that it doesn't work the way Google Docs does. And if you're both in the same unit, it won't save both of your changes.
Okay.
But you could both be in different units writing things at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Melissa is correct.
Yeah, well, that's actually good to know.
And regardless, just make sure you save often.
Mm-hmm.
Save.
Yeah, in this day and age with Word auto saving and Google Docs auto saving for us, saving all the time is not the same habit it was 20 years ago.
Exactly, that's so true. Yeah, I'm starting to have students say, "Oh, I lost it all again." I'm like, wait a second. We've been telling people to save for 20 years. What do you mean you lost your stuff? But yeah, it depends on the software, and this software doesn't auto save for you. Well,
So to clarify, we don't need to give our team members administrative privileges for them to be able to edit and add content.
You don't have to, but it would be a good idea to add your partner as an admin with you.
Okay,
You don't need to add a content guide or an education guide as admin, just your partner.
got it.
Because for you and your partner, it will be one module that you are working on, really. So you'll be co-owners almost.
I understand. Thank you.
All right. Dan, you want to bring us on
yeah,
home?
sure. Let's bring it all home. So today, at 5 o'clock. By the way, sorry, I was having trouble earlier today. I've been jumping off and on. My daughter's just throwing something out there just for fun. My daughter's about to have a baby. Like she's due yesterday, I think. So we're sitting there waiting, and so I'm jumping on to off and on phone calls and trying to. Anyway, no news yet. Maybe by the time this workshop's over, though, I'll be a grandpa. So. Random. Okay, so actually it fits pretty good because what we're talking about now is deliverables.
Dan.
See what I did there?
Got those grandpa jokes ready.
So you all have a delivery to make, and as does my daughter. Your deliverables by today at 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 Central, 3 Mountain, 2 Pacific. It's basically an hour and 5 minutes from now. Let's see, Mountain, 3 Mountain. Yeah, an hour and 5 minutes from now. We would like you to build your module outline, populate the overall summary and learning objectives table, populate the summary and learning objectives units in each section. Email the title of your module and content to the education guide when you're done. I think that's supposed to say to your content and education guide. So this might sound a little bit overwhelming, but honestly, if you've been following along and talking and doing the progress that we've been hoping that you're doing and hearing that you're doing, you should be pretty close to being able to do this now. Keep in mind that this can change. This isn't unalterable. If you put this module outline together and then tomorrow or the next day decide you want to adjust it, that's fine, but just get something put together. So any questions about this deliverable? Okay. I will say that it will probably be an easier task, a harder task for those of you working in teams of 2 because you've got to coordinate. But do the best that you can. And if you feel like you're clobbering each other with both editing the module at the same time, maybe one of you can volunteer to type up some of this in your doc, just keep it in your Google Doc. Do it in your Google Doc separately and then just put it all in at once so that it's not like saving over the top of itself, because I'm still a little nervous about how it works with two people editing the same module. So you had an hour and 5 minutes or 3 minutes now. So good luck with this. Stick around. Let's see, I think, Jenny, it would make sense if we did breakout rooms for them to have open and working on whilst doing their deliverable, yeah?
Yes.
So before we send them off, Eileen had a question. So we gave you the Google Doc outline template, and we also have shown you how to do it in HydroLearn. And we did both of those in parallel in this last hour on purpose, because we want you to choose what works best for you. Some people want to do everything in Google Docs before putting it into HydroLearn, and other people want to jump right into HydroLearn. So this is really up to you. If you want to do it all out in Google Docs first and then move it over, that's fine. So just you and your partner can decide what you feel most comfortable with.
Yeah, there's no right answer, I think, for that one.
Yeah, we just want you kind of moving forward with your organization and planning of your module. Yes, Sina? Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, Sina. Yeah, that's correct. Actually, I have a question for Jenny. If the like for the learning objectives that we have a table, if you want to rejig the dimension of each column of the table, how can we do it? Because when I give dimension to the table property, it changes the entire table.
Let me navigate to one real quick. I believe this is one of the features that we've recently updated to. Let me see. Okay, I remember what's going on now. So if you are trying to edit like a column, sorry, let me share my screen here. Okay. So if you wanted to edit a column width or row height or something like that, what you see here, the changes that you make here, may be different than what you end up seeing when you view live. So, I mean, it can be a bit of a pain, but once you change, a column width here, what I would do is save, publish, and then view live, and then look here to see that it looks correct.
Right on.
So it's a little cumbersome, but it's better than what we had before. Okay. So I'm going to continue making your breakout rooms.
Jenny, I'm doing it since you were presenting for us.
Okay. Thank you.
So there's a question there about organization and course number. Do we have guidance? Maybe.
Where's the question?
It's a direct question to me. And now she sends it to everybody.
Okay, so let me see here. So for organization, what our previous fellows would do is they would like combine. So let's say we had Utah State and Alabama. So we would have like USU underscore, I don't know what that acronym is for Alabama, UA, I guess. I don't know, something like that. Or you can do / you can do just a composite of your different organizations. It's really up to you. So for course number, doesn't have to be a number specifically. If you are all teaching a similar class, you can just put hydro or hydrology or something to that effect, hydro 1, whatever you want. And then term as well. The term actually turns out to not be so important because if you can reuse your module later, and when you do that, you can update the term at that time. So You can just put a year if you want. If you know you're going to use it in 2022, you can just put 2022 or something to that effect.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and open all the rooms. If you have another question for us, you're welcome to hang out here before you join your room. Yeah, and we had another group last year with 3. So they just abbreviated and put underscore between them. What it helps with is searching.
Melissa, I have a question for you. So, do we reconvene after they've been sent to their content groups? Or do we discuss deliverables, send them into content groups, and then they can just leave from there when they're done?
We discuss deliverables and then send them into their content group so they can dismiss from there when they're done.
Okay.
Could you check your phone for me too, please?
Jenny, I tried out what you said and still I have the same problem. So when I give dimension to a column, it applies it to the entire table. So it looks really crooked on the and before actually that, if we hide the module and then press publish, it doesn't publish the entire module.
No, it doesn't publish when it's hidden.
Okay. So do you want me to show it to you how it looks on my screen? So
Yeah, let me refresh my memory on how this works.
okay.
And if you want, Sina, you can join your room and then I'll pop in when I have an answer for you.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jenny, am I supposed to go to my breakout room?
If you want, I can send you somewhere, but this
It
is
did send me and I went there and there was nobody, so. It's okay. I mean, I just wanted to know if.
oh.
And they are actually like fixing that, sorry, developing their outline, I guess.
Yes, they should be working in HydroLearn now.
Right. So I'm gonna go wherever you send me.
Well, it looks like you are just still in the room that you were in before, your content room, and there's no one there, so you don't need to go.
Okay. I mean, should there somebody there from the fellows?
No, there's no fellow in there. It's just an old assignment.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and I'm gonna go visit Sina real quick.
You're gonna go all the way to Turkey? That's what they call a silly joke, I guess.
How are you doing, Ahmad?
Muted.
I'm doing good. Thank you, Melissa.
All right, all the rooms are closing now.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get into the next thing. Before we drop you into your larger groups for some feedback on your modules, we wanted just to remind you about the deliverables for you to bring back for the session tomorrow. So between now and our next meeting, 11 o'clock Eastern time, make sure that you make any needed revisions to your module in HydroLearn or the outline that you've been working on based on the feedback that you received today and that you'll receive in the next final group session. And finally, number 2, have you sent your consent form to Jenny? If not, make sure you do that. And have you submitted your screenshot to show that you completed HydroLearn 101? So make sure you get those things done before our session tomorrow.
I am
Okay,
finished.
so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm glad you got this. I'm not done yet. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So now in a second, when Jenny's ready, we're going to drop you into your larger groups to have each group share out their modules. You just where you're at this point. So once again, we're going to do the same feedback process like we did with the learning objectives. So, you know, some things you might think about or consider where you're giving feedback is the topic relevant to undergrad or early level graduate hydrology or water resources engineering? When you get feedback on that outline, you know, does the outline include an intro section, intro within each subsection? Are the sections clearly labeled and numbered? I know in other modules, we found that if you have section 1, then you might do 1.1, 1.2, and so forth, just to make it clear about the structure of those sections to make it easier to communicate with students as you're using your module. And then once again, on the learning objectives, you know, are they representing different levels of Bloom's taxonomy? Are they using those measurable verbs and so forth? So just keep those things in mind as we go into this final session for feedback. And I think it's my understanding once the groups finish, I think we're just gonna have you drop out then and not return to the main room. Is that correct? I'm pretty sure that's correct. So
Yeah, that is correct. Sorry. Sometimes I can't find the mute button for some reason. So once we share in your groups, when your group is done, then you'll kind of dismiss from there. And so we'll just meet back here tomorrow morning using the same link you used today to join the call. Are we ready, Jenny?
Yep, ready when you are.
All right, Jenny has opened the rooms. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to hang out here and check with us. Otherwise, we'll see you in the rooms for sharing.
and are we meeting together after this or we're not coming back?
I mean, I was gonna come back in case we had any questions, but
Okay.
I think we're ready for tomorrow.
Okay, well, I guess we'll just check in before we go. Alrighty, thanks.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And how much time do we have in the breakout rooms?
Well, you're dismissing from the breakout room, so
Right.
I'm gonna try to take
I mean-
less than an hour.
Less than an hour, that's right. Okay, I didn't want to keep them longer than what they expected. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it seems like Dan is not back yet.
All right, well, Doug is in Dan's room, so hopefully he'll facilitate that conversation. Alexander, were you able to get into your room?
Okay, he's assigned. Alrighty, there he goes.
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna peace out.
All right. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
First one that gets more attention than the ones at the end.
Like the oldest child always has the most pictures, most baby pictures.
So somebody has baby pictures?
I was comparing it to the oldest child. There's always the most baby pictures of the oldest child, similar to whoever goes first gets the most time and feedback.
Okay. All right. I was slow on the uptake on that. Okay, so I think the group that went last time was the hydrologic modeling group. So why don't we hear from them first?
Sure. Are we just presenting our table, or what do you want to see?
The module that you've created in HydroLearn, or if there's no content there, the table in Google, or maybe a bit of both. So share your screen, show what you've put in HydroShare, not HydroShare, HydroLearn, and just give a sort of a 2 to 5 minute update on your status.
Okay. So you can't see it, but we decided to call our module Watershed Sensitivity to Drought, working title, because hydrologic modeling and data analysis didn't sound super exciting. And that's like what every module is, apparently. So this one, we kind of tried to come up with some, bit of an overarching question to really motivate some of our learning objectives and kind of thinking about, broad picture, what it is we're trying to achieve. And so all we have is the table so far. It'd be nice if I could maybe zoom out, figure out how to do that. That's too small. But it's not, yeah, I mean, it's not so different from what you guys saw. So introduction is also going to include a site description of our field site that we're going to ultimately model.
So do you know what that site is?
Yeah. I have lots of information on it. We weren't sure if this was the right place for it, but it seems appropriate. So then section 1 was more of an empirical analysis where we look at influence of land use on ET runoff and drought effects, looking at the terrestrial water balance, making sure students really understand what are those components, and then what are some of the hydrologic processes that yield stream flow generation. So kind of just looking at a lot of rainfall runoff, and then trying to calculate annual ET using P and Q data. And so really trying to actually get them working with data and applying the knowledge that we gained up here to calculate ET, and then using some statistics to look at seasonality in ET. And since this is going to be in the Mediterranean climate, we'll really be able to kind of back out the seasonality of precipitation and then how that affects Q. And then given that analysis, section 2 moves to the eco-hydrologic model application, where we'll be using RESIS. So we'll introduce them to RESIS. We'll talk about internal model structure that is similar to the rainfall runoff processes we had talked about, and then use some of that data they just processed and feed it through the model and make sure they understand how to look at some of that output. So being able to observe output, and then do a little bit of model sensitivity, where we just vary a few parameters here and there to understand kind of how those processes that we've talked about in the beginning are actually modified within the model and how that affects output. And then with that output, we move on to model evaluation, where we look at certain model evaluation metrics, why it's important, why we want to be able to quantify output uncertainty and actually validate our model, and then ultimately ask the student to justify whether or not the degree of uncertainty is reasonable for engineering or management applications. and then some bonus interpretive visualization in Python. That's what we got. That's our module so far.
Okay, well, that's actually pretty impressive for the first day. So what do other folks think? Any questions? So yeah, any questions from anybody?
Yeah, we tried to make the learning objectives much simpler. So if you read from the previous version, they're like much more simplified. So hopefully this makes better sense.
Just a quick question. So earlier when you guys presented, I may have gotten it wrong, but it seemed like one of you was going to focus on section 1 more, and the other person was going to focus on section 2, and then I believe Kazi, you're going to focus on all 3. For your course adaptations, are all 3 sections going to be implemented in the module as part of your course, or are you going to choose one?
Are you asking me, like,
or your group in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe Anne wants to take it.
I think we were viewing these sections as being cumulative. So I think for my class, which is really predominantly on data analysis, I'll just be focusing on using section 1, but hopefully it serves as a launching pad for Luis and Kazi's classes to get into section 2 and then into section 3. Yeah, and then in the future, in modeling classes, maybe I will use sections 2 and 3 as well.
Okay.
So yeah, we were sort of hoping that that they were building on each other.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it does, and that's it's very elegantly portrayed in the 3 sections. I was just curious if there'll be sufficient time, for example, if all 3 sections are being covered, do you think, would it be a single, like a 3-week section of your course, or would it be the entire course? I don't know if you thought about that.
I think the majority of the time would be taken for section 1 and 2. Section 3 is pretty small. This can be done in like a couple of hours, as far as I understand. I mean, so it should be pretty small, and it's mostly post-processing and visualization and how exactly you evaluate models' performance. First section is pretty important because it kind of gives you all the basics that you need to understand, the conceptual understanding, and then kind of introduce you to the data analysis that you require to pre-process the data for model calibration or model input. So second section basically kind of drives you through the entire model building as well as model running, and then how you do sensitivity analysis. So you get to have you don't really develop a model, but you get to use a model and see how it's sensitive to different output parameters and how the input parameters and how the outputs are changing. And then basically section 3 is kind of putting things together, that what exactly you do with the outputs. So how do you know your results are valid? So you basically evaluate our model's performance. So the reason I will be using like kind of all 3 of it, because my course is called Hydrology. It's a graduate level course. It's mostly about, I'm not going to be giving the basics of hydrology, but rather on the model development part. So there will be some pre-processing of the data, model development, and some post-processing. So that's why like I'll try to get resources from all the 3 different sections. But yeah, I mean, anybody who is going to be completely using this module as a course, I think there is plenty to learn from it. If they want to just focus on a single section, that's also pretty useful. And together, that's what we try to do is, keep it aligned so that as a whole module, it makes sense. So most of our time was trying to connect the different 3 goals that we have for our own courses. So, but I think we did a pretty good job over the last few hours. So we are actually pretty happy with the progress we made. So yeah.
I'm going to echo Dave that this is really a lot of work, and this is a great place to be at this point. My only one comment would be in your middle column. I noticed it looks like the kind of main topic and then minor topics like terrestrial water balance, major fluxes, relationships between fluxes. But if you scroll down into section 3, then it's kind of the major topic and then maybe like essential questions, kind of guiding questions. So either one is a good way to do it, either subtopics or essential questions, but I think mixing them up might be a little confusing. So I would either just pick one kind of format and go with it throughout.
Yeah, I think that's my bad. That's only in section 3, I think. So yeah, I will make them like statements rather than questions. So these are like unit names. So like under each in each unit, they will get to learn this. So yeah, I will change that. Yeah. Thanks for noticing. I mean, I was
Another thing that we were noticing in some of the sample ones is that learning, what were they called? Learning assessments, or those were listed as subunits, and we've started talking about what those might be, but we haven't specifically like created pages or even bullet items for them yet, but we'll definitely put those in.
Yeah, and that's a great place to be at right now, because that's the focus really of tomorrow, is thinking about the learning activities and the check your understandings and how to make sure that that's all aligned with your learning objectives.
Yeah, but also we did another thing is for with every single learning objective, we tried to put which Bloom's taxonomy level it's associated with. So that kind of helps us. I think the only one that we missed is create, but because we're not really developing a model, rather we're analyzing and evaluating. So that's the only level that we have missed. The other 5 are like kind of equally distributed among all the different subsections. So that's something we also wanted to address.
So a small thing with respect to Bloom's taxonomy, ultimately, this is a table that's will be what the students see. And the students do not know what levels 1 and 2 are. If you say Bloom's taxonomy levels 1 and 2, then the students probably do know, or at least they know it's something that they can look up. So before now, and when you show it to students, you might want to put the words Bloom's taxonomy levels 1 and 2, wherever you're just saying levels 1 and 2.
Right. I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, this was for you guys just to get an understanding that we wanted to focus on all the levels. Yeah, but you would definitely remove that. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
But I know that I had exactly that same comment on one of the previous workshops modules when I was reviewing the final one just before it got shown to the students. So it's easy not to remember to change it.
But you do want us to include the level, right? You don't want us to delete the level.
I think there's value in full disclosure to students as to what the expectations are as to how deep it needs to be. You might need, this again gets to how much detail one should show students about what expectations are. But if you're stating a learning objective and you're stating, well, this learning objective is to try get you to level 5 of Bloom's taxonomy, and then you might need to just have a sentence at the top that that says, for the students in these modules, you will have learning objectives stated in terms of these taxonomy levels or something like that, so that they kind of, I mean, you never know whether you should be telling that to students or not, whether there's a benefit in telling it to students or not. But I think in balance there is.
Yeah, it could be distracting, and it would require some additional explanation, but I hear your point.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you put Bloom's taxonomy level 4, then that's sufficient. They can always Google that. For me, I see these levels being labeled as more for faculty who are going to pick it up. You can kind of easily skim and go, oh, this kind of goes across them all. That fits my course.
But I mean, is it not helpful to a student to know that if they just have to remember this versus they actually have to be able to create based on this? Hopefully the words catch that to some degree.
Right. Yeah. I just don't think that we have to like give students a tutorial on Bloom's taxonomy before they can understand that.
Yeah, I had a question about, we were discussing before we came back to the main meeting room that the different activities that we were planning to put into the course. So what we were planning is for individual sections, since we have 3, for individual sections, we will have like separate set of activities. There can be multiple choice questions. There can be, we can ask students to write an evaluation or maybe a paragraph. But we were thinking at the end, a student can combine the outputs of all the 3 different sections and maybe produce like a 2-page assessment report based on what he or she has learned throughout the entire module. And we wanted to, like, that's where we kind of wanted to play with the title, because we wanted that to be reflected in the title as well. So that's why we were like, I know like both in Anne's and Louise's cases, they're interested in some way, they're interested in how the watershed is going to respond to different changes, to whether it's land use or whether it's vegetation or whether it's forested watershed or so on. So that's why, and since drought is very important for California for the last almost like more than a decade, so we thought it would be good to have data, good to have that in the title as well, that how sensitive watersheds are to drought vulnerability based on changes that we make. So that's kind of like the motivation behind naming our course.
So would you plan on having some sort of context material that that sort of frames it? Oh, well, California's been in a bad drought for the last decade. And in this module, we're going to learn how to quantify the impacts or something like that.
Anne, you want to respond to that?
And have a few news pieces, and I don't know.
I think this is a question to Luis. I think we were, so in the first section, we were going to compare 2 watersheds, a forested watershed and an urbanized one. And I believe that was going to sort of play into the model simulations in section 2, where the sensitivity analysis was going to focus on the difference in land use. And then in section 3, there was going to be a sort of, that would be interpreted in the context of a design problem. We haven't exactly decided whether we're targeting a planning board or a zoning board or the U.S. Forest Service or someone who would be managing watersheds and trying to determine mitigation for summer drought and how they could manage land use to try to prevent the worst impacts of low summertime flows.
Anyway, we've still got another 3 modules to get through, so we should probably keep going. But thanks, guys. I think this is great.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback.
Who's next? I forget who went 3rd last time, but if you guys remember.
Well, I think it was us.
Okay.
Let me share my screen. All right, so we haven't uploaded our template, our outline in HydroLearn yet, but this is our basically outline that we developed. We generalized the topic. We call it chemical module, chemical hydrogeology. And as we were discussing, we ended up adding one more objective. But the main introduction, includes the summary and overall learning objectives. Within that, we had the first section would cover the introductory to groundwater chemistry part, where we're going to talk about major ion chemistry, trace elements, and also the units for expressing the different parameters. And so that's the new objective that we more recently made for this particular section. And sections 2 and 3 was what we discussed earlier, and that remains the same. So the different sections include developing a different type of diagrams to represent groundwater chemical data, and how you can use those diagrams to identify hydrochemical phases, groupings of similar water chemistry, and then how you can use that to interpret and evaluate the geochemical processes, particularly how you can have mixing of different groundwaters. And the third one is more of the applied nature of our module, where we provide a brief background on the standards that they use to assess groundwater. And then the students will then use those values to compute whether the water is suitable for drinking water or irrigation. I just made a few notes over here where they'll be using a factor called heavy metal pollution index to assess drinking water, and all of the other factors like Kelly's ratio, sodium absorption ratio to assess irrigation. And then we finally thought to include a case study which would kind of encompass all of the activities. So we'll give them data sets from different regions, Turkey, US, and few other regions, and then ask them to assess the waters and that, see if those could be used for drinking water and irrigation purposes. So that's kind of a very quick overview. Any suggestions and feedback, we welcome that. And if I zoom in, I think it becomes too small.
Any feedback from anyone?
Nope.
You could also put, if you're worried about people not being able to read it, you could put the link in the chat and then they can see it in Google.
I can do that.
But they mustn't change it. Unless they improve it.
I will say that our group went back and forth on the title and how specific versus how, I don't know, how wide to make the title. And your group seems to have focused very much on the sort of the very broad title, and then it is showing one example of geochemical application. So I'm not sure if this is really this is just sort of a comment that I think maybe all the groups are struggling with the best way to title the modules that they're developing.
No, absolutely. I think that's one thing that we were going back and forth as to how specific we wanted to keep our title. Just having it as chemical hydrogeology or groundwater chemistry, and maybe add in a subword like what you did, and drought, or so include and suitability or application. Do you think that would make it more specific? Because there is a different group that they are working on environmental aspects in water quality. So we don't want to overlap.
I almost wonder if David or Melissa want to chime in and suggest something from the, I don't know, the HydroLearn perspective.
So, I mean, I think that it needs to be more specific than just chemical hydrogeology, because I would suspect that chemical hydrogeology is a huge, broad topic. And maybe something like stiff and Piper diagrams to understand groundwater chemistry and water rock interactions might be sort of cut to the chase of what it actually is.
I would also add that you can change the title. You just needed a title today to get it started. And so I might hold off. I'm one of those people that I don't title my manuscripts until after the whole thing is done, because it's kind of like naming a baby before it's born. I feel like you have to see it and know its personality. So I would, if you're not sure what you want to do with it yet, I would just keep some ideas in the back of my head and let it be, and put it on my to-do list for next week. So tomorrow we're going to talk a lot about setting up a really strong, high cognitive demand, authentic task for the students to engage in. And a lot of people end up changing their module title to be really reflective of that task that ends up kind of becoming the end goal. So just to say, I think things are going to shift, and I agree with Dave that a more specific name is better, but I might wait until the baby's born to name it.
Anybody else with any other comments? What are the sort of prerequisites you think somebody will have to have for doing this?
So we aim this at upper level undergraduate. So basic chemistry would be one, like we said in our first learning objective.
I think they should also have some basic knowledge of geology, because we will be talking about the rocks as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do they need to know basic groundwater? Do they need to know what porosity and permeability and pressure head are and things like that?
They should know a little bit of groundwater, but not about the physical aspects yet, because that is not going to strictly affect the chemistry that we see. It's more of the chemical nature of the geology, chemical makeup of the rocks themselves. But both of us, both Sebnem and I, we plan to teach this at the end of our hydrology course. So they should have at least a decent idea of, or build up a decent background in aquifer systems and such.
Okay. Is there a specific study site, a place that you'll be using?
For our case study, Sebnem, go ahead.
There is a really nice area that I worked in. It's located in Turkey near Kütahya in Inner Anatolia. And there is mining area there. They extract silver, and in the southern part, in the northern part, they extract coal. And the southern and northern parts have really different chemistries. So I thought we can ask students questions like that. In which well do you think is located, so which well is located near the coal field, for example? We will give the information and then ask. I thought we can have boxes, and they will choose the location and they will choose the well name. I just thought that would be a good exercise for them to check their understanding. While I was having the Hydro Learn 101, that gave me a lot of ideas.
Okay. All right. Okay, shall we move on to the next one? Who is that? Perhaps it is Sina. You suddenly popped up. Is it your module next?
Yeah, I suppose so. So we've been working on our table here, and it's not 100% done, but we have the draft, vomit draft, if you will, of the sections and the units that are the third column. And it's a little bit bigger than
Is there a way you can get closer to your mic or something? It seems like its sound is coming in and out.
Oh, sure. Is it better now? No?
I think that's okay.
Okay.
So does your module have a title yet? I guess we had that long discussion.
Yeah, so our module is groundwater, groundwater flow, groundwater flow and modeling. Or something to that effect.
So why don't you walk us through the layout, Sina?
So it has three main sections, and the first section is really an overview or review of the water cycle. It's not going to be more than 2 lectures, and we put everything under the framing of groundwater at the center of the water cycle. So we try to talk about the subsurface water components, or highlight them more rather than the surface water, and then have a separate unit for, a separate subsection on soil properties and soil water, so that we can move on. And this would be like 10-15% of the course, and then like 35-40% would be around principles of groundwater flow, so mostly theory, but students being able to do some hands-on calculations about different aquifers and water flow across different zones and contexts, and then groundwater contamination. And then the main part of the course is about modeling groundwater flow. And the way we think about it is we want to have a simple, teaching the basics of modeling to students so they understand the terminology and concepts of modeling, and then a simple modeling assignment that they develop a model and work with it, hopefully in Excel. We have an example of that. So that would be nice, so that they construct every bit of it with their equations themselves in Excel, and then moving to the ModFlow software for the second assignment that they have, so that they learn how to read the help, implement it inside the software interface, and become familiar and confident using that on their own. I see a lot of people are trying to read everything. Sorry if it's zoomed out. I tried to put everything into one page, but I don't think it's going to fit anymore.
So what's actually involved in running ModFlow? And will the students be able to do it?
When you say what involves that, do you mean in terms of the software or in terms of the content?
I guess both.
Right. So we got the name, I think it was Mod Memes or something like that. It's like a particular piece of the software that adds on to the main software. And then with that, they can sort of construct a distributed model of groundwater. And there are some nice basic examples on ModFlow help that they can do it step by step themselves. We did actually one of them ourselves to see how it works, and it worked. And that would be either the first assignment or the Excel one. And for the second one, we want to give them something more of a real world example for landfill contamination, hopefully an example in Sweden, that they can understand the context and the numbers and see how it relates to something that they're familiar with.
Yeah, so this assignment 2 is like mainly focusing on this solute transport. I mean, the contamination, water contamination part. But as Sina said, so actually this ModFlow has been developed and they have a very nice forum. So if the students are really ambitious and they want to increase their skill in learning, so I mean, there are lots of available documents and videos, YouTube films.
Anybody else with any thoughts about this feedback?
Yeah, so is the purpose of developing a model in Excel to just confirm that they have grasped all of the principles from the first 2 sections?
Yeah, I would say so.
They're going to have to implement all the equations themselves. Is it to just make sure that they actually understand it and then can run ModFlow, which already has all of those things in a real world situation? Are you like, what are you going to ask them to do with the Excel model? Just get some groundwater.
Imagine you have some data and some equations and basically an Excel or a Google Sheet. How would you go about using that platform to implement all the equations to develop a model from scratch so that it gets the input data, produces some output, and then you check the water balance equation across the model, and then play around with the parameters and do some simple sensitivity and like manual calibration tests. So all the basics of modeling, but do it everything from the scratch on your own without using a software package.
I mean, can I ask why Excel?
I've been using Excel before in teaching surface model, surface rainfall runoff model, and it was pretty good. It's really fast, and the thing is, students would see how a very seemingly simple tool like Excel can easily turn into a powerful model that can be used for student tasks. And it's an undergrad course, so we need to sort of factor that in, that probably not everyone is familiar with coding in MATLAB or Python or things like that.
So I guess looking at that sort of in that line of questions, if you read the learning objective number 3, it is at the end of the section, the students will be able to, well, it says using the USGS ModFlow. So, and then you've got quite a bit of the module on actually developing numerical modeling, numerical solvers, and things like that. So I think there's a little bit of a choice that you need to make about whether the objective is to teach people how to put together a numerical model, or whether to teach people how to interpret and use the results. I mean, I certainly don't want to necessarily diminish the importance of teaching people all the things about numerical solvers and calibration, but it does actually seem to be a little bit of a different direction than maybe the learning objectives.
I'm glad you raised that point, David. The thing is, the number of items under each subsection on this table doesn't really correspond to how much time we're going to assign to it. For instance, for the modeling component, it's essentially just one paragraph telling people what is a flux, what is a storage, what does it mean to have parameters in the model, what is the variable. And this is just for them to become familiar with the terminology of a model. rather than spending like a full lecture on that modeling component. It's also a way of sort of reminding ourselves what exactly we want to put in that subsection rather than how much time we want to spend on it, if it makes sense.
Right, yeah.
But you know what, your point is,
yeah, I mean, I think
point
these are just things to sort of think about. I mean, certainly you've got here a big long list of topics, all of which are really important. And my initial reaction is that this is a huge amount. And you're going to have to figure out which are the ones you can realistically fit in.
Sure.
I guess, yeah, for example, you've got hill slope hydrology and catchment processes, energy transformation, mass balance, soil physics. So then you've got hysteresis, Darcy's law, pump tests, wells. It's a huge amount.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I would
that's a
say,
good point, yeah.
yeah, go on, Zara.
No. I think that's a very good point, David. So, and for sure, we have been too ambitious to writing in all, but yeah, we have to shorten it. But I fully agree. I mean, yeah, if we would put a lecture on, for example, numerical modeling, so then we have to put it in the learning objectives as well. But yeah, I mean, as Sina said, so it's going to be about like how we are going to dedicate the time of the students to work and then learn from this perspective. Yeah, but these are really good points. So for sure, we need to, yeah, to remove some of those points, I think, as well.
I'm wondering if you might think about spending your time these next 2 weeks focused on developing that last section. The groundwater modeling section, and then to work backwards if you have time before the semester starts, or to use other modules to supplement. Because I think that last section, the groundwater modeling, is really kind of the more unique content that we don't have right now.
Okay.
What might your thoughts be on focusing your efforts on developing that third section first?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, I would just sort of repeat myself that many of these pointers here are not really going to be like the hill slope hydrology catchment processes. They're essentially two figures that we just want to show the main concepts and how the water cycle relates. It's not going to be even more than, if there's going to be a video on that, it's going to be 5 minutes, or it's corresponding to essentially 2 paragraphs of the literature that we put there. So I agree, it looks very fleshed out in the beginning and overwhelming, but it's more about reminding ourselves of the order of things we want to put there rather than spending a lot of time on them. But I like the idea of beginning from the last bit of the course and the model directly.
Right. Any other feedback here for Sina and Zara? Okay, the next, and I guess the last one we discussed today is Alex and Sam. Do you want to share what you've done?
Sure. I think this is someone still sharing the screen. No, I got it. All right, let's see. All right, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. We kind of got bogged down in updating our learning objectives after the discussion. We had like, oh, we need to fix this, we need to fix that. And then we had a chat with Melissa, and then she's like, oh, you might want to focus on doing this and come back since it's an iterative process. So we started working in Hydrolearn, but then again, that bogged us down a little bit because then we're focusing on sort of the technical aspects more so than the content that we needed to develop. But then overall, what we wanted to do is illustrated in this document, and the point that we want the students to get out of this is to have an appreciation of the vulnerability of coastal aquifers to contamination. And so that's sort of broad. Maybe we might want to make that more specific with respect to contamination. It's sort of an intrusion. And so in terms of the outline, we thought we would have an introduction, and we had a discussion about whether we should make this somewhat of a problem-based learning type of module, where on the outset, this is the problem, and then this is how you need to solve this problem, and then this is you need to develop a mitigation plan, which is what we had at the end. So let me just quickly go to the end. So the students need to develop a mitigation plan as it pertains to anthropogenic impacts on saltwater intrusion. And so what would be resources and activities and knowledge that the students would need to acquire along the way to then be able to develop this plan. And so again, Melissa had some suggestions on how we can do that, whether we put that at the beginning, and then she suggested a HydroLearn module that we can perhaps use as a template in structuring that language, and then walking the students through the process of then ultimately developing the plan. But then, so we have our learning objectives, some of which we have revised in the introduction. And then part of the background is providing some knowledge to the students about what they needed to do as they align with the learning objectives. What are coastal aquifers, unconfined aquifers, confined aquifers, groundwater pumping, cause of depression, groundwater contamination as it pertains to saltwater intrusion. And then we just had some notes about where we can get some of that material, videos, USGS websites, having case studies, and so on. And then the first section will require the students to acquire data. And what we're thinking of is having 2 locations on the East Coast. There are at least 2 places in the East Coast, in Virginia and Georgia, where you've got large cause of depression. But then you have to get raw data and then process those data, and then actually using the knowledge that they have acquired in identifying cause of depression, say, aha, there's a cause of depression. But first of all, they have to acquire the data, and then they have to process the data. It's one of those things which is easier said than done, right? Just go and get the data, but then once you get the data, it's so they go through that process and walk them through, and then perhaps maybe we might have some videos, some tutorials to help them. And then once you get the data in Excel, right, it's still a mess, and then you need to work on it so that it's in a usable form, and then maybe you might have to also modify the data so that you can put it in some contouring program that will just need maybe it's XYZ data that they need, and so you have to pass out all those data. And so once they've done that, then they can now then do the analysis and ultimately the interpretation. But then along the way, they need to know basic things like Darcy's law, how you contour the data, how you determine groundwater gradients and flow paths, and then how do all those things pertain to saltwater intrusion. And then ultimately, once they have that knowledge, then they can get to developing the mitigation plan, right? So maybe there's a location A and B, which we're trying to find a B, which is a good location. And then again, from previous discussions, we want to have locations most likely on the East Coast where anybody can say, I'm not going to use Georgia, I'll use Florida, right? And then you have USGS data from Florida, and then they can use that, and then it be transferable. But then can they say, based on the analysis of the data in Florida, there's a potential for greater saltwater intrusion in the future because there's more pumping, greater population growth, and so on. And so that's a brief overview of where we are and what we're trying to put together to come up with maybe like a 10-hour module on this topic.
Any thoughts from anybody? I kind of like the approach you've taken of having the problem of saltwater intrusion as the sort of framing set of concepts, and then working back from that and helping students learn the processes needed to understand that problem. So that, I think you'll have to obviously introduce the problem at the beginning as well, but it provides a context so students know why they are doing what they're doing, which is often quite important.
Sure. I agree, and I like how you just glancing at your revised learning objectives. I like how you kind of we've wove that through the objectives to really highlight like why is it we're doing this. So I didn't read all of them, but the ones that I noticed definitely improved from your input. So.
Any other feedback from anybody? Does saltwater intrusion relate to the groundwater chemistry one we had earlier?
The one that was being discussed?
Yeah, I guess I'm just...
Right. I think broadly speaking, you might fall under contamination, but then I think it's distinct in the saltwater intrusion.
Yeah, we were initially thinking of including saltwater intrusion, but like I mentioned earlier, we peeked into Alex's and Sam's file. Sorry about that. Just so that we don't overlap. But we saw saltwater intrusion, so we decided to remove that from our main module.
Okay.
I like, Sam and Alex, how you're thinking about that messiness of real data from the outset and the way you're structuring the module to help students kind of be ready to deal with that real world data.
Right. And part of it is in terms of the challenge, right? Like, again, thinking about the transferability. But I like the idea that was also proposed that ultimately we can also just get the data and then have a file that we can provide to people to use in lieu of them saying, go to the USGS website. Because even I, sometimes I pull my hair out, working with the USGS website. And so we'll have to a good medium, in terms of the conclusion we're going to do with that. Or it could be the above.
I seem to remember from your picture earlier, Alex, pulling hair out might be hard for you.
I don't have any more hair.
Not so hard for some of us. Luis could have a lot of hair pulled out.
Pretty easy, yeah.
Alex, I had a quick question.
Sure.
In the introduction, the learning objectives, they seem like it was more of a fit in the background section, which is, I believe, section 2. Or do you, I was wondering if you'd have specific tasks in the outline.
So I'm not quite clear about what your question entails. So in the introduction, we just put all the objectives.
Oh, my bad, sorry.
Yeah.
I got it confused.
Anyway, maybe we've come to a lull, and it's also approaching at least 4 o'clock where I am, which is the designated ending time. Any last comments from anybody before we quit and welcome you all back tomorrow?
Before you close, I have Martin. Oh, Martin is still here? Maybe he left. Okay. Yeah. Well, he was suggesting that it would be nice if everybody knows about what everybody else is doing as early as possible in the process, because we have so much expertise in between the different fellows that some may want to weigh on others. So he was suggesting that maybe sometime tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, every group can take a 2-minute in the main room to say what their module is about. Now that people start to think more about it and things start to shape up. Melissa, what do you think? And we can talk about it more, but that was his suggestion.
Yeah, I think if we can keep it to a brief, it might be a lot if everyone takes like 10 minutes to discuss their module, but if we can keep it to a brief, like 1 slide, 1 minute kind of thing, I think that could be.
Yeah, he was suggesting no more than 2 minutes per group, or less maybe. Yeah.
Good luck. You got a bunch of professors. Anyway, guys, think for you, those of you still here, think about maybe it looks like Emma will be asking you to present 2 minutes or less on your modules tomorrow.
But we'll make sure it's in the afternoon in the last session, not in one of the first ones. So you have time to think about that tomorrow.
Good idea. This way people stay brief.
All right. Well, thank you for those of you who stayed up all night in order to be with us, and we look forward to seeing you in
tomorrow night.
About 30 hours from now, whatever day that is for you. All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.